Well, that's, I think, a very important question. The observation is that the prevalence of anxiety disorders, which already was very high, with about 10% of the people in society experiencing anxiety disorders in the last year. And there is some late evidence that this prevalence is increasing in the last decade. And this evidence is coming from epidemiological studies conducted in a few countries where they, in standardized ways, measure the prevalence of anxiety disorders using psychiatric interviews. And they actually have seen that in the last decade, the prevalence of anxiety disorders is increasing with about 50%, which is huge. This is in combination with studies that have looked at medical health care utilization for mental health disorders. And they also have observed, for instance, in Denmark, using data of the entire Danish population, that anxiety disorder also show an increased prevalence over the last decade. So I think there is now data from different types of studies using psychiatric epidemiological studies where people have received a standardized psychiatric interview in combination with a medical healthcare record data or registry data that really both show that more recently there is an increase in the prevalence of anxiety disorders. This is especially driven by the younger adult population or adolescent population. So I think for me this is really alarming because I think there is now quite consistent evidence that in the last decade we are facing more anxiety disorder. And I think this is important because we know anxiety disorders already have a huge impact on the burden of disease. This is also what is recognized in the WHO, the World Health Organization, overview of burden of disease, where anxiety disorders have been ranked quite consistently in the top 10 of disorders with the most impact on disease burden. And I think that's really because there is quite a lot of disability that is involved in anxiety disorders. People with anxiety disorders are limited in their functioning, both their work functioning, their social participation. So this disorder is having huge impact on burden of disease. And this is really especially driven by the fact that anxiety disorders very often arise at early age. It's affecting already adolescents at high rates, and that really causes potentially a lifelong burden with anxiety disorders. And I think that's why the impact of anxiety disorders is so high, because unfortunately for some people this is really impacting life during a very quite extended lifespan.